Thank you very much, Clara, and it's nice to be on this panel with some of my actual mentors from many years, Arena Denkelman and Lorena Aguilar. You are really in the presence of greatness, especially in the area of gender and climate change, so I'm very humbled to be on the panel with them. Before I get started, earlier in my remarks, I mentioned CAPWIP as one of the most important meetings of women leaders on the road to the climate change conventions later this year and next year. But I also meant to mention that there is another very important meeting happening early next year in 2009 that you might want to know about. It's led by the President of Finland and the President of Liberia in a partnership. It's called, I don't know if I have the exact name, but the International Colloquium on Women's Leadership and Security. It will be held in Liberia, I think is it March? March of 2009. Okay, so Ira can put her hand up. She's the person to talk to about that meeting. It's a very exciting meeting, about 400 people. Many ministers will be there, heads of state, I believe, and other dignitaries, and also women's organizations from around the world. And also, we will have some flyers about that out on our booth. So what I'm going to talk about today is somewhat similar to what Lorena's talking about, just getting into a little more detail about the area of policy related to gender and climate change, also the area of finance, where is the money for all of this, and also what we all can do together, what you can do in different regions and that sort of thing. Next slide. Next. As I said, the Global Gender and Climate Alliance is an alliance between 25, so far, UN agencies and international civil society organizations. We're growing every day. Our goal for our overall work is to ensure that that climate change initiatives, policies, and decision-making at all levels is responsive to gender. We do that in a number of ways, which I'll get into a little bit later in the presentation. We're led by United Nations Development Program, United Nations Environment Program, and International Union for the Conservation of Nature. We do as part of us. We're also in discussion with lots of other agencies that are here in the room. So I'll talk first about the global policy context. And Lorena went into this a little bit. I just wanted to make a comparison that's very visual. First of all, there are 3 multilateral environmental agreements. There's the Desertification Convention, there's the Biodiversity Convention, and then there's the Climate Change Convention. The first one, you don't have to read this whole text, but you can see that there is language here on gender in the Desertification Convention, and this was actually the first of the 3 major environmental conventions to actually include gender considerations. Next. In the Biodiversity Convention, there is language, and there's also been work done by IUCN recently to develop a gender policy for the CBD. And lastly, we have the Climate Change Convention. And if you go back, there's no text there. So we have basically a huge gap and a lot of work to do together to make sure that gender is included in global policy going forward. These are some of the conventions and international mandates that actually are, although we do not have language on gender and climate change at the global level, these taken together actually provide us with a mandate within the United Nations and throughout governments to actually implement work on gender and climate change. So you can look at many of these, but you'll also hear a lot about the Hyogo Framework for Action here at the bottom, which has excellent language on gender and disasters as the most recent one. Also at the global level, just wanted to make a comparison between one of the strongest mechanisms for participation of NGOs and women's organizations is the Commission on Sustainable Development that meets in New York every year. There are 9 major groups that were decided at the Agenda 21 meeting in 1992, and women is actually the first group of people that are allowed to comment and actually intervene. In the Climate Change Convention, it's quite different, and they don't go by the Rio Conventions. The idea is that there are 5 constituencies, and women, as you can see, are absent. They don't really participate in any of the 5 constituencies, and actually trade unions have recently been given a tentative confirmation that they could be another constituency, but women still haven't gotten there. So that's something that we can all work on together, is to make sure that women's organizations from around the world, and all of us and gender experts, have an opportunity to sit down and have an intervention. At the moment, I've heard some wonderful speeches today, and I thought it'd be great to bring these people to Poland and do an intervention, but I thought that we have no space. So if we had that space, it would make it a lot easier to bring gender into the global level. I have some pictures too. Lorena and I have similar pictures. I have more though. So we could just go through these six slides. You'll see these are the opening and closing sessions of the UNFCCC over the past many years. And you might see some similarities between those pictures. Now to the national level. These are the countries, as Lorena also said, the least developed countries are all required, this group of countries is required to report on their national level. These countries, all of these NAPAs, these National Adaptation Programs of Action, have been submitted and finalized. So at this point, I can't tell you go home and talk to the strategy group that's working on these. What I can tell you to do is look at them, because in the implementation of those, we were told by the Climate Change Secretariat. So again, all of these NAPAs have been finalized in terms of the text, and the next step is to actually implement them. I actually looked, the Alliance and UNDP and a couple of others have, and we do, as we mentioned before, have done some analysis of the existing NAPAs that are out there. Generally, actually, could you go back to the previous slide first? Just some comments on that. With some exceptions, the NAPAs at the national level generally treat women as victims and only emphasize women's participation in consultations. That's generally, if you look through all of the NAPAs and a lot of the language on women and climate change that is done by governments at the national level, you'll see, oh, we brought women into the consultations, we asked them for their opinions, but there's nothing really on women's leadership. There's nothing on women's entrepreneurial opportunities, nothing that really puts women in a positive kind of action-oriented light. In the NAPA process, actually, they are required to focus on the community-level input as an important source of information, recognize that grassroots communities are the main stakeholders, and I'm quoting from the UNFCCC. At the same time, there's not, gender and women are really not emphasized in the NAPAs.